Okay, how's everybody today? Pretty good? Good. Hope you're enjoying the slightly cooler weather. Some of my friends are very happy. They thought they were waiting for winter to arrive, but I don't think winter's come yet. I heard it's supposed to warm up again this weekend. So I think, honestly, it's the warmest November I can remember. Last month was very, very warm. In fact, on what was it? Not yesterday. It was today's Thursday. So Tuesday, it was up to 32 degrees. I mean, I loved it. If it was like that all year, I'd be happy. I mean, it wasn't too hot, but it wasn't cold. It was perfect, I thought. So yeah, 32. That was wonderful. But it's nice today also. And it rained last night, so the air is more clean. But today is a very happy day for many people that I know in Taichung and Taiwan. Do you know why? Yeah, take off the mask. I have friends that have been waiting for this for over a year and a half. They've been waiting to be able to take off their mask when they're just walking around. I mean, of course, if you exercise, you already could take off your mask. Like when I ride my bicycle or go out walking at night. But now you just don't have to. Anywhere you go, you don't have to wear a mask outside. Still inside, but not outside. So that's good. I think that's smart. And I really think, honestly, one of the things that is changing everybody's perception. Do you know the word perception? What does perception mean? Yeah, it's a way of seeing something. A perspective is a way of looking at something. I guess if you say, this is my perspective. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Perspective. So perspective, sometimes we could say it is my point of view, right? It's the way I see things. What 角度 am I seeing something from? So I think it's my perspective, my point of view, that one of the things that's changing this thing about masks, or the global perception of masks, is what big event just started a week ago? Not the protest, something else, bigger. Globally, bigger than protests. It's the biggest event in the world. No. Yeah, World Cup. Okay. The biggest sporting event in the world, bigger than the Olympics, bigger than the Aoyun. Okay. So people watch World Cup, and what do they see? They see lots of people having fun without any mask on. And everyone, this is the most watched thing in the world. Billions, literally billions of people watch these games. So they see everyone around the world is watching these games, and they see everybody in the crowd, and they're all having a good time, and nobody's wearing a mask. And I think that's changing the perspective. Actually, so I just used another word, perception. They sound very similar. Okay. So my perception of something is also the way I see something. Okay. So perception comes from the word to perceive. Okay. So my perception is the way. What is your perception on this? How do you perceive something? It means, how do you see it, or how do you feel about it? But if you say my perspective, also it's very similar. What is your perspective? What's your opinion? What's your idea? What's your point of view? Okay. So these words are very. Perceive is more like your vision, to see something, how you see something. Perspective is also the way you see it, but it's also a little bit more like my idea, my opinion, the way I feel about something. I mean, again, they're very similar. They can be used very similarly. Okay. So when people, it's my perception, or you could say it's my perspective that World Cup is changing the way the world sees COVID-19. In fact, I really think that World Cup is almost like a end of COVID-19 party, for the world, right? Because the whole world, everyone's coming together, and it's the biggest sports event in the world. Everybody's watching, and as you can see, nobody's wearing masks. So it's almost like this is the celebration at the end. Now, of course, there's still COVID-19, and COVID-19 will be here forever. Okay, it'll never disappear. I'm sure we'll have more cases and more cases, but it's like the perception is that it's kind of like the end of that era, that period. Okay, so why don't we say it together? Perspective, perspective, point of view, point of view, perception, perception, to perceive, to perceive. Right, so you can say, I perceive that he is not happy. Okay, it means I can see that he is not happy. Okay, and then these two words, of course, are nouns. Okay, okay, so yeah, so I think those are good words, and we use them a lot, right? I always use the word perspective. It's my perspective that it's the way I see it, okay? Or I perceive that this is happening. Okay, so speaking of World Cup, it's very interesting because I've been following, I'm sure some of you have too, these protests in China. And they're really, the one word that I hear, this is a word we've learned already, and I'll just write it down again. I hear many people say these protests are sorry, that's an R-E, okay? They are unprecedented, means it's not happened. Nothing like this has really happened before. Why don't we say it once? Unprecedented. Unprecedented. Yeah. So, if you've watched the videos, if you watch the TV or gone on YouTube and watch these things, it's shocking to hear people, groups of people in the street saying, Xi Jinping 下台 or 共产党下台. That's unprecedented. That just doesn't happen in China normally. And so, but it's my perception, my perception that one of the many things that cause this, of course, I think the biggest problem that for Chinese today is the lockdowns, right? COVID-19, they can't take it anymore, right? We say they're fed up. They're at their limit, limit is 限制. So if you say somebody is at their limit, it means they cannot take it anymore. They can't do it anymore. You say, I am at my limit. When you were a child, if your parents are very angry and maybe you kept doing the same thing, and finally your father or mother says, look, I'm at my limit. I can't, you need to stop. That's it. No more. Okay. So anyhow, I think the Chinese people are at their limit when it comes to COVID-19. But I think there's several other things. There was a big fire in Xinjiang. I don't know if you saw that, where people apparently they burned to death because the building was locked from the outside. Okay, but I think World Cup, I read that World Cup is another reason, right? Because in China, people really, really love football, 足球. And they're watching this 足球, they're locked down, and they see, what do they see? They see all these people having a good time with no face masks. And they think, I saw one comment that said, somebody on Douyin or something, they said, what planet are we living on? Okay, in China. Means that what's going on? Here we are locked down. Here we're in the situation. We're living this existence, and the rest of the world is normal, right? So anyhow, this is very, very interesting to see what's going to happen. But let's read this article because this is such a big story right now, and we don't know what's going to happen. So here the headline says, Chinese students in the U.S. back protesters at home. Okay, so these are Chinese students studying there. It says, crackdown coming. Beijing warned that authorities would crack down on protests, while footage taken in Guangzhou showed people battling with police. Now, of course, battle, B-A-T-T-L-E, is like a fight, right? You can battle many things. People can actually fight physically, or you can say he is battling, cancer, right? He is battling COVID-19. So if you're fighting against a sickness or anything, he is battling corruption, 贪污, anything like that, you're fighting against. But usually if we have a 战争, like a war, W-A-R, war, the war has many, many battles. So sometimes we have a saying, we say he won the battle, but he did not win the war, or he has not yet won the war. It means you've won one fight, one battle, but there's still a big war, Okay, so why don't we say that word? The first start with the 名词 battle, battling. So battling basically means fighting, right? Fighting. Okay, so crackdown, I think you know what that means. It's a noun or a verb, right? So here we have as a noun, we say crackdown, and you can see it's one word. But here, it's a verb, to crack down, right? To crack down on protest. But a crackdown is one word as a noun, okay? So why don't we say this together? Crackdown. Okay, so yeah, I mean, of course, everybody's waiting for the government to stop or try to stop these protests, to crack down, to put pressure on them, to put a lid on it. Okay, so yeah, okay, so let's go on to the article. Let's see here. So it says here, Chinese students studying in the U.S. on Tuesday held a candlelight vigil for the people killed in a blaze in an apartment in Xinjiang's Urumqi, while protests continued in China yesterday against COVID-19 lockdowns, which have been blamed for the deaths, even though Beijing warned of a crackdown. Okay, there's a couple words here. These students held a candlelight vigil. What's a vigil? Yeah, this word I think originally started with that. It's when somebody dies, and you hold a special. It's not even a ceremony, right? Usually, a vigil is when people just sit there, and they mourn. You know the word mourn. We learned the word mourn before, right? If you're sad about something and you lost something and you mourn it, okay? Lament. Okay, that's a good word. Lament. Okay? If you say, I feel very sad, I'm just going to think about that person or something. So sometimes you see where somebody dies, especially sometimes somebody famous, right? And they will put up some candles, laju, and they will sit there and they will just kind of mourn that person. There's no ceremony, there's nothing going on, but they're just sitting there. So vigil can start with that, but there's other kinds of vigils we can have, right? If you're just sitting around waiting for something, like especially a group of people waiting for something, sometimes we can call that a vigil. They're holding vigil, they're waiting, okay? Or maybe somebody is sick someone famous is sick in the hospital, and their supporters are sitting outside to show their support. So we can say they're holding a vigil, or they're usually we say holding vigil. No, it doesn't have to be death. It could be someone, but usually it's something very serious, okay? It's not like it's solemn. It's something you're kind of waiting or yeah. Yeah, well, obviously, I think there is a connection there, but vigilant means on alert, right? That's an A. Is that right? A-N-T? Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, V-I-G-I-L-A-N-T. So this word vigil is there, but vigilant means that you are on alert. You're careful. You're waiting. Watchful, yeah, that's a good word. So if someone is I'll clean this up soon. Watchful. So if someone's very vigilant, I'll tell you who should be vigilant, right? Would be a guard, right? If you have somebody who's guarding, or they're waiting to warn, maybe they're watching to see if something's going to happen, we say they are very vigilant, okay? So now if they're not vigilant, you might have a problem, because maybe they're sleeping, or they're playing cards or something, and they don't see what's happening, okay? But you say you must be vigilant. For example, we could say Taiwan must be vigilant against a Chinese attack, or an attack by China, okay? That means we must be on guard. We must be aware. We must be watchful, okay? So anyhow, I think, yeah, there is a relationship to the word vigil, because a vigil, you're waiting. You're just kind of sitting there, okay? Why don't we say this word together? Vigilant. Vigilant. And then the simple word is watchful. Watch, W-A-T-C-H. C-H-F-U-L, watchful. Why don't we say that too? Watchful. Watchful. Right. Sometimes we say on guard, right? On, two words, O-N, guard, G-U-A-R-D. He's on guard. What? Alert. Yeah, alert is a good word. It's very similar to be alert. I think to be alert would describe being vigilant. Someone who is vigilant or watchful is alert. They should be alert. So yeah. So anyhow, so we have that word. They held a candlelight vigil, and I'm sure you've seen this before. They put a bunch of candles on the ground, and people just sit there and they mourn or they lament. Actually, I haven't talked about this word. Lament is very similar to the word mourn. Mourn is more common, but if you lament something, it means you're also very sad about it. It's the same idea. So why don't we say that word too? Lament. Lament. For example, you could say, I lamented the death of my dog, or she lamented the loss of her favorite iPhone. She lost it. So she's lamenting that. She's like, I wish I... Well, I think you always do, but yeah, I mean, always should be vigilant. New York is not as... I want to say this. New York, Taiwan is super, super safe, right? New York and most other cities are not as safe. Yeah, you have to be vigilant when you're in the subway in New York. But a lot of people, for decades, people think, whenever I say New York City, people think it's this very dangerous place. It's not, okay? New York City is actually quite safe by American standards. So, but in the subway, there have been some cases where people have been pushed onto the tracks by usually crazy people, people with 神经病, and they do something like that. But yeah, so you should always be vigilant when you're on the subway, especially in a big city like New York or London or somewhere else. But I want to say again, New York City is not a dangerous city, because a lot of people think, oh my, New York City it's not. Honestly, it's not a danger. Well, Los Angeles, yeah, I mean, depends where you are, right? Most American cities have a place you should be more careful and a place you don't have to be. I should always be careful, but we say a good part of town and a not so good part of town or bad part of town. That's true for any place. Yeah, I think I don't know LA very well, but I think East LA, Eastern Los Angeles, you have to be a little bit more careful. Like I went to university in North Philadelphia, Feicheng, North Philadelphia. You have to be a little bit more careful. But I will say this, and I've said this, maybe I've said this to you before. I spent several years, or 2 years, in North Philadelphia. And I rode the subway by myself at night all the time, and I never, ever had a problem. So, yeah. So anyhow, I just want to get that straight. But I will say Taiwan is super safe. I don't know if you saw, about a week ago, there was a global survey. It comes out once a year. Taiwan was ranked #1 in the world as it's very specific. It said the safest place to walk by yourself at night in the whole world. That Taiwan is #1 safest country to walk by yourself at night, which I thought was interesting. It was quite good. It is an honor. And I will say it. I tell my foreign friends, I'm saying it's true, right? You see people, not just men, of course, but women and children, no problem. Okay, so going back to the story, it says they held a candlelight. Candlelight, of course, means there's candles there. Vigil for people killed in a blaze. Of course, blaze, we could also say a fire. Blaze, the fire, we can say the fire is blazing, okay? But a blaze can be a 名词. I think most foreigners would say, or when you read this, urumqi, but I think in Chinese they say ulumuchi, right? Or something like that. Yeah, anyhow. Yeah, let's go ahead and read this then. Chinese students studying in the U.S. on Tuesday held a candlelight vigil for the people killed in a blaze in an apartment in Xinjiang's Urumqi. while protests continued in China yesterday against COVID-19. Sorry, COVID-19 lockdowns, which have been blamed for the deaths, even though Beijing warned of a crackdown. Okay, so here it says, at the University of Southern California, students held candles and blank sheets of white paper while calling for Chinese President Xi Jinping to step down and chanting, down with the Chinese Communist Party. Okay, the CCP, 共产党. Okay, so what are they calling this? The 白纸革命 or something like that, right? White paper revolution. Okay, so yeah, so University of Southern California, yeah, okay. Chanting, of course, we've said this before. Chant is when you say something over and over and over again. Sometimes for religious reasons, sometimes because it's a 抗议, protest. But people, when they chant, they say the same thing over and over again. Why don't we say it together? Chanting. Chanting. And chant can, of course, be a noun. You can say, like in Taiwan, if you go to a temple, you will hear like a Buddhist chant, right? For Jiao, they have these certain chants that they say. Okay, so let's read this. At the University of Southern California, students held candles and blank sheets of white paper while calling for Chinese President Xi Jinping to step down and chanting, down with the Chinese Communist Party. Let's say this again, Communist Party. Okay, now this, I think you know this, but you know what blank means, right? Yeah, I mean 空白, that means it's empty. There's nothing there. But it's not just like a paper, right? If you say let's say, sometimes when this happens to me sometimes, you're going to say something to somebody and suddenly your mind goes blank, right? You can't remember what you're going to say. You're like, what was I going to say? So you can say, my mind is blank. I can't think of anything. It's like empty. So yeah, we could say the paper is blank. Yeah, and this word blank gets used very, very widely. You can say, I have a form, but the form is still blank. I haven't filled it out yet or registered yet. Okay, so yeah, it's a good word. Okay, let's go on. It says, one of the students who gave his name as Jason told reporters, I would feel ashamed if I did not take a stand, referring to his relative safety overseas, even as compatriots who spoke out at home faced the threat of arrest. Okay, of course, arrest is when the police or somebody catches you or arrests you. Okay, so he said, I would feel ashamed. You know what ashamed means, right? You feel, yeah, 丢脸, very bad, right? If you do something wrong, usually you feel ashamed. Why don't we say it together? Ashamed. Ashamed. And you can see the word shame, S-H-A-M-E, is right there in the middle. So to feel ashamed is to feel shame, right? So yeah, it's the same idea. Okay, so he could say, I would feel shame. You could say it that way. I would feel shame, S-H-A-M-E. But he says, I would feel ashamed. Same thing. If I did not take a stand. Now, of course, to take a stand means to hold a position, right? Recently we had in Taiwan an election, and most candidates took a stand on certain things, right? They said, I support this, I do not support this. They took a stand. Okay, so he said, I would feel ashamed if I did not take a stand. And he was referring to his relative safety overseas. Now, of course, when we say relative safety, it means compared to other places, right? Yeah, compared to China, of course. In California, he's pretty safe. He doesn't have to worry about getting arrested for this. But so you could say my relative safety. I will, let me just write this down because it's a similar idea. We could say my comparative, because we use the word compare, right? Compare with an E. Yeah. Oh, I'm getting better. Oh, there we are. So yeah, with an E at the end. So to compare, comparative means, if I compare, my comparative safety, of course, relative is a more common word, relative safety, but we could say, oh, sorry, notice I erased the A. Comparative safety. Yeah. Why don't we say that word comparative? Comparative. Relative. Relative. Now, of course, this word has a completely different meaning. It means like your qingqimen, right? My relatives, right? Okay, so different meaning. So relative safety overseas, even as compatriots. Now, this is another word. What does this mean, compatriot? Yeah, your countrymen, or I guess you say countrywomen, or country people. But yeah, compatriot just means you're like, I think all of you are probably Taiwanese compatriots, right? Now, we use this word a lot when we're overseas. Normally, I wouldn't. Well, I could. You could say that. You could say, I would probably say my fellow. If I was, for you here in Taiwan, I would probably say fellow, Taiwanese or Americans or fellow citizens. Countrymen, yeah, countrymen, fellow citizens. But when this word compatriot is usually when we're overseas. When we're in another country, you say, oh, he's my Taiwanese compatriot or my American compatriot. Okay, so yeah, it's that idea. Now, of course, patriot is a different idea. Compatriot is a what? 爱国者, right? Or 爱国者, yeah. Well, no, I wasn't. I was using that example. I'm not your fellow citizen. I'm from my passport says USA. But yeah, you are all fellow citizens of Taiwan, right? Now, if you were in the U.S. right now or in some other country, you could say, oh, he is my Taiwanese compatriot. Means that we are fellow citizens. You can use this word anywhere, but I think it's used more when you're outside your country. So why don't we say it together, compatriots? Compatriots. Okay, fellow citizens. Fellow citizens. Right, and I've said before, I'm your fellow resident of Taiwan or Taichung, but I'm not your fellow citizen because I'm not a Taiwanese person. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's a word actually that I was just thinking about because it's very similar, although it's spelled a little bit different. And this word gets used a lot, especially in what I do. I told you I do that 跨文化训练 for people. And this word gets used all the time. And I'm always afraid people don't know what it means. Expatriate is someone who is living outside their country. Okay? So, although technically, I know I grew up in Taiwan. I was born in Taiwan. But technically, I am an expatriate in Taiwan because I'm not a citizen of Taiwan. Taiwan is not officially not my country, even though it unofficially is. So I could say I am an expatriate. Now, if you were living in, in Thailand or America, you would be an expatriate. We could say you were a Taiwanese expatriate. But expatriate does not refer to any specific nationality. It just means you are living outside your country. And for short, people shorten this word to expat. So we could say, oh, Taichung has many foreign expats. Means there's a lot of foreigners. And it's not for visiting. If you're here for a visit, like you're here for 2 weeks or even 2 months, you're not really an expatriate because you're not living here. You're visiting here. You're just a visitor. But if you're actually living here, then you would be an expatriate. Okay? So why don't we say together, expatriate, expatriate, expats, expats. Of course, it could be this is plural, but you could be with or without an S. Okay, yeah, that's a good word because often I hear foreigners using this word, and I always think, does everybody understand what that word means? Yeah. Okay, so let's read this together. One of the students who gave his name as Jason told reporters, I would feel ashamed if I did not take a stand. Referring to his relative safety overseas, let's say those last three words, relative safety overseas, even as compatriots who spoke out at home face the threat of arrest. Arrest, right? We could say risk, right? Risk or threat, 风险 of arrest. Okay. That's a photo caption. So let's go on. It says, Beijing's top security body on Tuesday warned that authorities would crack down on protests in China, which erupted over the weekend across major cities and continued in Guangzhou on Tuesday night and into yesterday, according to witnesses and social media footage. Of course, footage is like video, right? Okay, so when we say top security body, I mean, body usually, this is not referring to your body, but like a government group, agency. You know, any government organization, we could describe it as a body, like the, well, like the 立法院 is a legislative body, right? You know, the 文化局 is a government body. You know, it's a group, an organization. Yeah. So this is a security body. Okay. Warned that authorities would crack down on the weekend. And the word we've looked at this before, but what does erupt mean? Yeah, to explode. To now, where does it originally get used? Volcano, 火山, right? You know, if you have, I heard in Hawaii just a couple days ago, one of their big volcanoes erupted again. I mean, it erupts. I think it was the first time it erupted in 40 years or something like that, but it erupted. So and what do we call that? What's that stuff that comes out of a volcano? What's the word? Yeah, lava. Okay. So it's a funny word. Well, there's lava cake, right? Usually a chocolate cake, and the chocolate comes out of the cake when you cut it open. But yeah, lava is that really, really super hot stuff that comes out of the volcano. I've seen videos in Hawaii, from Hawaii. You know, lava, it can move very fast or it can move very slow. Sometimes it can just creep along. And you should never do this, but people do it. They walk. Usually you're not allowed to because there's a line. The police put up a line. But I've seen pictures where people will walk up to the lava and they take different objects and they put it on the lava. And it's pretty amazing. Like they take a can of Coca-Cola and they put it on the lava and the can just goes and it explodes, you know, because it's so hot. It's kind of cool. So anyhow, let's say it together. Lava. Lava. Okay. So, yeah. So, and this word too, erupted. Erupted. If you want to turn this into a noun, it's T-I-O-N, right? So let's say it together. Eruption. Eruption. Right. So you could say he erupted in anger, right? If someone just explodes, they're so angry, they suddenly explode or they suddenly blow up. You know, we say they blew up. He erupted in anger. Okay. So let's read this together. Beijing's top security body on Tuesday warned that authorities would crack down on the protests in China, which erupted over the weekend across major cities and continued in Guangzhou on Tuesday night and into yesterday. According to witnesses and social media footage. Footage. Right. Okay. So it says here, security personnel in hazmat suits walked shoulder to shoulder, taking cover under see-through riot shields on a street in Guangzhou's Haizhu district as glass bottles smashed around them. Videos posted on social media showed. Okay, so there's a description here, right? Security personnel in hazmat suits. Now, during COVID-19, there's a different word we've used for these suits. We call them PPE, which means personal protection equipment, right? PPE, it's those white suits. You know, what do they call it in China? They call it xiao bai, right? Or, yeah. So hazmat stands for what? What does this word stand for? Think about two words, hazmat. What does it stand for? Okay, well, as a 形容词, we say, hazardous. Hazard, of course, is a danger. So we say hazardous, how does this work? Oh, there we go. I guess I have to push it the whole way. Let me start all over again. Not hazard. Hazard. Okay. Hazardous what? What's MAT stand for? Anyone know? Not mattress. Materials. Okay. So, you know, if you want to protect yourself against something dangerous, like, you know, let's say there's a chemical accident, right? And there's all these dangerous chemicals. They put on a hazmat suit to protect themselves, right? It's to keep yourself from being harmed by that material, whatever it is, okay? So we say hazardous materials. Why don't we say together, hazardous, hazardous materials, materials, hazmat, hazmat. So it's a hazmat suit that they're wearing. Okay, so they walk shoulder to shoulder. Of course, when you walk shoulder to shoulder, it means you're next to the, you're beside the next person, right? Usually it means there's a row of people, shoulder to shoulder. Yeah, it could be just two people, right? You could say, I walked shoulder to shoulder with him down the road. Okay, so why don't we say together, shoulder to shoulder. Of course, this is your shoulder, right? So shoulder to shoulder, taking cover. Okay, taking cover means you're protecting yourself, right? If you take cover, for example, if it starts raining suddenly very hard, you say, I took cover in the 7-Eleven when it started raining. It means I was looking for protection or refuge. You know, refuge means to protect yourself. R-E-F-U-G-E, refuge. I took refuge. I took cover, okay? Means I ran inside. I tried to protect myself. So they were taking cover under what? See-through riot shields. Now, what's a shield? Right. If you go back 500 years ago when people were fighting, they often carried a shield, right, to protect themselves. Usually maybe they had a sword or spear, and then they carried a shield to guard themselves. So it's a protection. But a riot shield is something the police still use today, right? If there is a riot, what's a riot? Yeah, 暴动. So if you have a riot, the police usually have to carry this big shield, and it's a see-through riot shield. Means that what? What's another word for see-through? Yeah, transparent. If you can see through the shield, well, it's probably made out of plastic. I don't think it's made out of glass. Transparent. You can see through it. Like you can say these walls are transparent, or these are see-through walls, okay? So why don't we say together, transparent? Transparent. Right. If we describe somebody as being very transparent, what does that mean? Yeah, they're honest, or you can see what they're thinking, right? They don't conceal. You know, conceal means to hide. They do not conceal. Yeah, an open book. C-O. Sorry, that's an O. They do not conceal anything from you. They're very open. They're very honest. So we could say that person is very transparent. You know, if they're happy, you know they're happy. If they're sad, you know they're sad. They're very open. Okay, so they do not conceal anything. Why don't we say why don't we say this together? See-through, see-through, transparent, conceal, conceal. Okay, so they took cover, they got refuge, they protected themselves under see-through or transparent riot shields on a street in this district as glass bottles smashed. So people were throwing bottles at them, right? Videos posted, okay, showed. Okay, so let's read this together. Security personnel in hazmat suits. Hazmat suits. Walked shoulder to shoulder, taking cover under see-through riot shields. Riot shields. On a street in Guangzhou's Haizhu district. As glass bottles smashed around them. Let's say it again, smashed around them. Videos posted on social media showed. Okay. So it says in the footage, people can be heard screaming and shouting as orange and blue barricades were pictured strewn across the ground. Okay, so of course people are screaming and shouting. What's a barricade? Yeah, it's like, well, it doesn't have to be a roadblock. It can be any kind of a barrier. So if you wanna just a simple word for barricade, let's just go with barrier. So, when they're fixing the road, like I saw today on the way here, often they will put up a barricade around that area so that cars and motorcycles will not drive there. They put up a barrier, or we could say a barricade. So it's like a wall or something. It doesn't have to be a wall, but something like that to stop something from coming in or going out. A barricade. So why don't we say it together? A barrier. Barrier. Barricades. Barricades. Okay, so these blue and white or blue and orange barricades were shown or pictured strewn across the ground. What is strewn? If something's strewn about, what does that mean? Yeah. So yeah, probably a good word is scattered. Scattered about means they're, it's just here and there. It's not usually it means it's not orderly. It's just, like if you say his room is a mess, his clothes are strewn across the floor, right? They're just thrown all over the place. Or there's garbage strewn all over the road, okay? So that word it just means it's very luan. It's not, there's no order to it. So why don't we say together, strewn, strewn, scattered, scattered. Yeah, I think these two words are the same. I mean, we can use them in the same way. Okay, so let's read this. In the footage, people can be heard screaming and shouting as orange and blue barricades were pictured strewn across the ground. Strewn across the ground. Right. And that's a photo. Okay, so it says here, people are seen throwing objects at the police, and later, nearly a dozen men are filmed being taken away with their hands bound with cable ties. Okay, so they're throwing things at the police. 12 men are filmed. Okay, they're on the video. Being taken away with their hands bound. What is bound? What's another word for bound? Yeah, handcuff or tied. This word bound and tied. Yeah, it's the same idea. They're bound. Okay, usually it means to be restrained. Okay, so you can't move with cable ties. Okay, a tie here is not a 动词, it's a 名词. It's like a, I think what I'm guessing is, it seems like sometimes police now, they like to use these plastic ties to, instead of handcuffs. You know, in the old days, they had those metal handcuffs with, you needed a key, but now they have these plastic ties. Anyhow, I don't know if it's the same thing, but it's a cable. Cable's like a xian, a tie, and it's okay. Anyhow, let's read this. People are seen throwing objects at the police, and later, nearly a dozen men are filmed being taken away with their hands bound with cable ties. Okay, so let's read these two paragraphs together. Jason said that freedom of speech is the greatest of human rights, as a society cannot advance if people cannot express their opinions. No Chinese media, especially social networking platforms, are carrying stories on the protests, Jason said, adding, this does not happen in a normal society. Okay, so of course here he's talking about freedom of speech. Okay, human rights, 人权. Yeah, I think everything. Social networking platforms, of course, would be like, well, in China, they're not allowed to get Facebook. They have their own, they have what is it? China has, is it Weibo and Douyin and all those? Yeah, they have their own social media. Okay, so yeah, platform, of course, is Pingtai. Yeah. Okay, so let's read this. Jason said that freedom of speech is the greatest of human rights, as a society cannot advance if people cannot express their opinions. No Chinese media, especially social networking platforms. Okay, let's say it again. Social networking platforms are carrying stories on the protests, Jason said, adding, this does not happen in a normal society. Society. Okay. So he said, here he goes on, it says, we are holding up blank pieces of paper to tell the world that we want to express our mind, but we cannot, he said, adding that the event has spread so fast because the younger generation in China has great expectations for freedom and democracy. Okay, so so what does the word expectation mean? Hope. What's the Chinese word? Is it 期待 or 期望? Yeah. So 期待, yeah. There's a very famous book called Great Expectations by Charles Dickens, right? If you have great expectations for the future, it means you have a great hope or 期待 for the future, okay? So why don't we say together, expectations. Expectations. Okay, so the younger generation, this 年代, has great expectations for what? For freedom and for democracy. Okay, so let's read this. We are holding up blank pieces of paper to tell the world that we want to express our mind, but we cannot. He said, adding that the event has spread so fast because the younger generation in China has great expectations for freedom and democracy. Democracy. Okay. Okay. So it says here, I'll read these two paragraphs together. However, there is still a long road before freedom and democracy are implemented in China, he said. Jason said he was familiar with the democratization processes in Taiwan, adding that the protests in China, like the 1979 Formosa incident, are the beginning of a democratic movement. Okay, I find this is very interesting that he actually referred to Taiwan. Most Chinese students, I don't think they are maybe that aware of Taiwan's history, but he is, obviously. So it says here there's a long road, right? If we say there's a long ways to go, there's a long road, it means we still have a long road to go, a lot of time before freedom and democracy are implemented. And we've talked about this word before. What is to implement? Yeah, to put into practice, to put into action. You can pass a new law, right? A 法律 or 规定, but it has to be implemented. It has to be put into action. Okay, just like we can say today, the no face mask outside restriction was freedom was implemented. This new guideline was implemented. Okay, so why don't we say together, implemented. Okay, now democratization can be a 名词 or it can be, here of course it's a 形容词. It means to become democratic, right? If you make something democratic. So we say, it's a long word, democratization. Let's say it together, democratization. Democratization. Okay, so yeah. Anyhow, so yeah, this is the beginning. That's what he says, and I've heard other people say the same thing. So okay, let's read this. However, there is still a long road before freedom and democracy are implemented in China, he said. Jason said he was familiar with the democratization. One more time, democratization processes in Taiwan, adding that the protests in China, like the 1979 Formosa incident, let's say it again, Formosa incident, are the beginning of a democratic movement. Let's say it again, democratic movement. Okay, I don't know. I assume you all know this 1979 Formosa incident. I don't know how you. Yeah, so this is what we call it in English. Okay, Formosa. You know what Formosa is, right? It's the old name for Taiwan. Okay, yeah. So, okay. Let's read a couple more paragraphs. Let's see here. It says we need more people to wake up because it will take many years before a tipping point can be reached, he said. Another Chinese student, who gave her name as Xiao Ti, said she was against Beijing's brutal COVID-19 pandemic policies and wanted to pay her respects to those killed in the fire in Urumqi. Okay, so let's see this. People need to wake up because it will take many years before a tipping point. Do you know what this tipping point means? Yeah, it's like a turning point. So, if things are going like, let's say this is going like this, and then finally it reaches the top and then it starts to fall, right? A tipping point means it's that point when things really change. They really, there's right now it's the beginning, right? It's just the beginning. But when if you say something tips over, if it's starting to go and then it reaches a point where it keeps falling, it keeps going, that's the tipping point, because it's going to keep going. It'll go all the way. So it's that important that like you said, turning point or that tipping point where it's going to fall. It's the key point. Okay. So why don't we say together, tipping point, tipping point. And to tip, of course, means to fall over, right? He tipped over, or tipped. Yeah, usually it's tip. Yeah. The glass tipped over, the water tipped over. Yeah. So tipping point can be reached. And what does brutal mean? We've talked about this before. Brutal. Cruel. Yeah. It's usually it usually means violent or in a very bad way, in a cruel way, right? If someone's very brutal, usually that means they use force or they use violence to treat somebody in a bad way, a cruel way. Cruel, of course, C-R-U-E-L, cruel. Someone is very cruel to somebody. How do you say cruel in Chinese? Yeah. So, yeah. Why don't we say together, brutal. Brutal. Okay. Now, if you pay your respects to someone, what does that mean? Yeah, often it's when somebody dies, right? And you pay your respects. It's like you go there or you do something to show your respect for that person that passed away, okay? So let's say there's a funeral and you say, oh, I came here to pay my respects to this person. Or, we talked about earlier, we said the word vigil. You could say, I'm holding a vigil to pay my respects to this person, right? So often when someone, it's to mourn, but to show your respect to somebody, okay, to those who were killed in this fire. Okay, so let's read this. We need more people to wake up because it will take many years before a tipping point can be reached, he said. Another Chinese student who gave her name as Xiao Ti said she was against Beijing's brutal COVID-19 pandemic policies. Pandemic policies. And wanted to pay her respects. Respects to those killed in the fire in Urumqi. Okay. I think we can move on. But anyhow, we can see that these students are Oh, BNT. Yeah. So it's a foreign vaccine. Yeah. China's in a tough position right now because if they open up, they potentially, it's true. A lot of people will probably die, right? Because why? Because they have not vaccinated properly, or I've heard, especially among older people in China, the vaccination rate is very, very low compared to the rest of the world. And as you mentioned, Chinese vaccines are not very effective, or they're not as effective as some of these international or global vaccines. So, and they refuse to import, foreign vaccines like Moderna or BNT or others. So if you do that and then people are not properly vaccinated, or the vaccine doesn't last long, what are you going to do, right? So this is a big problem, right? There's a word I was using for recently. I don't think I've taught you this word. When it's kind of like, either way, anything you do is going to be a problem. There's a good word. It's a very long word, but I'll write it for you. Yeah. A conundrum is a problem that has no solution, or it's a problem that has a very, it's hard to find a solution. So if you say, I am in a real conundrum, it's a little bit like the word dilemma, right? Dilemma, conundrum, similar idea. It means I don't know what to do. If I do this, I'll have a problem. If I do that, I'll have a problem. Yeah. So these are good words. Why don't we say it together? Dilemma. Some people say dilemma, dilemma, or dilemma. I think either way is okay. So dilemma, conundrum. Right. So right now, China is in a real conundrum because obviously people just can't take it anymore, right? You can't just keep locking down. You know, like I said earlier, COVID-19 is here forever, right? We're not going to get rid of it. And so you cannot have zero COVID. Zero COVID is impossible. Even if the Gongchangdang says we're going to have zero COVID, there's no zero COVID. You know, the CCP cannot control COVID-19. They have no power over the virus. So I think that China is in a very serious conundrum because they don't know whatever you do is going to have a problem. But it's really killing the economy, you know, and people's livelihoods, right? We talked about livelihoods. Livelihood, what is a livelihood? Right. It means how you earn, how you support yourself, right? My livelihood, you can say this job or this company is my livelihood. It means that's how I support myself. That's how I live. Because usually because it provides money or income for you to live, to support yourself. So you can say, what is your livelihood, or what does he do for his livelihood? You could say, oh, he is a teacher, or he has a company or business. So why don't we say together livelihood? Livelihood. Right. And so in China, and I was watching this on the news, a large percent, probably the majority of small, 中小企业, small, medium-sized, like especially service companies and restaurants, they're gone. They're dead. How can you survive in this environment? How can you run a restaurant, or a store or a shop when nobody can go out, or it's 不一定. And today you can do business, tomorrow you can't do business. So it's destroyed people's livelihoods and also just being locked down. I was talking to my friend. He said even when he had to 隔离 in Taiwan, 隔离, okay, 隔离, I always say that wrong, 隔离 in Taiwan. He said even before it was driving him crazy, right? Just to stay inside for a week, or before it was 2 weeks. He was going crazy. So think about 3 months or 6 months or on and off, for years. Just terrible. So I can see why people, they just have reached their limit or their tipping point, right? We say tipping point. They've reached their limit. They just can't take it anymore. I saw on the news last night, we're talking about freedom of speech. I don't know if you saw this video, but now police, because of the protests, police on the subway, the Jieyun in Shanghai, and even on the street, they're stopping people and they checking their phones. And they go through their phones and they're looking for Telegram and other social media. And if you have it on your phone, they take your picture and you get reported to the authorities. So it's crazy, right? Because you're sitting on the train, the Jieyun, and the police come and say, okay, I need to see your phone. Let me see it. They go through all your stuff and looking for that. Yeah, I mean, right, and they're pretty good at controlling everything too, right? What did I read? I said I read that in China, I think this is correct. They said for every person in China there are 7 surveillance cameras, in the average, per person. If you look at the number of cameras surveilling, there's something like I think I saw the say it said 7 per person on the average. If you were to balance that out. No, obviously not. It's all about staying in power. But yeah, it really is frightening. And what's even more frightening is China would like to export this system to other countries. No, not just because but they try to promote this system in other countries. So that's why whenever you see China, like you see even like recently in the South Pacific, some of these small islands, that China says, oh, we'll train your police, we'll give your 警察训练, and we'll sell you the surveillance equipment. They're trying to promote that system to other countries, which is just crazy, right? So yeah. Okay, so I thought this was very interesting. We won't spend too much time in this article, but the timing on this is very interesting. Okay. And I'm sure this is very, 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 very sensitive right now, because in China, sometimes when a leader dies during a time like this, people will use this to attack the other leader, right? We've seen this before in China, like at Tiananmen Square, right? When was that? What was it? Hu Yaobang, he died, right? And they used that, the students used that to attack, Deng Xiaoping and everybody else. So anyhow, ex-Chinese leader Jiang Zemin dies. Okay, I know he was quite old, 96, I think. So it says here, former Chinese leader Jiang Zemin died yesterday, state media reported, hailing him as a great communist revolutionary who helped quell democracy protests in 1989. He was 96. Okay, so when we hail somebody, what's another word for that? Praise, 赞美, right? If you hail somebody as a great leader, you are praising them. Okay, you say, oh, he was hailed as a hero. Okay, when he did that. So why don't we say together, hailing, hailing. Now, hail has a very, very different meaning. What is hail also? Yeah. Fortunately, Taiwan does not usually have hail, but maybe in the mountains. But there's another kind of hail that's not very serious. It's very, very small. It's almost like, and we have a different meaning for that. I've seen that in Taiwan before. In fact, I've experienced it. It's called sleet. Okay, sleet is okay. Sometimes it stings your skin a little bit, but it's very, very light. And it's ice, but very, very, very small. But hail is usually like a stone, And I will tell you, maybe you've never seen this, but in America, if your car gets caught in a hailstorm, it's terrible, because you come out and there's all these dents in your car. It destroys the car. It can even break the glass. So if your car is parked outside in a hailstorm, it's a terrible thing. You have to, I don't know, throw the car away or something. Okay, so hailing him as a great communist revolutionary. Of course, a revolutionary is a person who fights in a revolution or who creates a revolution. Why don't we say together, revolutionary? Revolutionary. Now, of course, revolutionary can be a 形容词 too, right? You can, if something is very revolutionary, we can say a revolutionary technology, right? This is a revolutionary technology or a change, okay, who helped quell democracy protests in 1989. What does quell mean? To put down, to crack down, to stop, okay? Suppress, that's a good word, to suppress, okay? So if you quell, and we can use this word for many different things. For example, you can say, he suppressed his anger, or I tried to quell my anger. It means I tried to keep my anger down. Maybe something makes you very angry and you want to do something, but you think, I need to suppress, I need to quell my anger. Okay, so why don't we say together, suppress, suppress, quell, quell. So it's very interesting, because right now we have this protest for democracy, and of course the media says, oh, this guy helped quell democracy protests in 1989. So obviously they're trying to send a message. Okay, so let's read this. Former Chinese leader Jiang Zemin, okay, sorry, died yesterday. State media reported, hailing him as a great communist revolutionary. Let's say it again. Communist revolutionary. revolutionary, who helped quell democracy protests in 1989. He was 96. Okay. So it says here, Jiang took power in the aftermath of the Tiananmen Square massacre, in which the military used deadly force to end demonstrations and led China toward its emergence as a global economic powerhouse. Okay, what does this word powerhouse mean? It sounds kind of funny, right? House, power, what does that mean, powerhouse? Well, it's not so much a person. I guess we could use it for a person, but it's more like we use the word powerhouse to describe a country or organization or a company that is very, very powerful, very strong. Yeah. So we could say that China today is an economic powerhouse, right? Or you could say that Taiwan is a technological powerhouse, right? It's very powerful. Okay. So this word powerhouse, it's a funny word, but it's used to describe something that's very strong and powerful. Yeah. A what? Well, not just big. Big, you can be big. Like some countries are big, but they're not powerful. So like powerhouse. I would say that's quite rare. We don't do that very often. Usually it's more of a country or maybe a company, not so much a person. Okay, so yeah. Why don't we say it together though? Powerhouse. Powerhouse. Okay, and we've learned the word before, but what does aftermath mean? Yeah, in the wake of. Remember, it means after something happens. Usually, often this word gets used, means after a disaster or something bad. In the wake of, okay? Now, in the wake of, you could say in the wake of the typhoon, we had to clean up the roads, okay? You could say in the aftermath of the earthquake, there was lots of damage or, something bad. So it means afterwards, but it's a noun, right? It's a 名词. So why don't we say together aftermath? Aftermath. Okay. In the aftermath, and then we can read that in the wake of. In the wake of. Okay, so in the aftermath, in the wake of the Tiananmen Square massacre. And what does massacre mean? Right. If you kill lots of people, it's a massacre. Now, sometimes this word gets used for more normal things. Like, let's say we're in a 足球比赛 and our team gets destroyed, right? We lose 10-0. We can say our team was massacred by the other team. It means we lost really badly, okay? So why don't we say together massacre? Massacre. It's a little bit strange because it ends with an R-E, but it's pronounced E-R. So massacre. Okay. Not really, because Holocaust is a bigger, broader idea, and it's used to describe very, very serious long-term things like, and so obviously the Holocaust is used to describe the killing of up to 6 million Jews during World War II. And usually when you say that word, it's with a capital H, right? When you see the word with a capital H, Holocaust. I don't know if there's a Chinese word for that. How would you say that? Yeah. So well, again, it would mean a very, very, very serious disaster. Well, I mean, I'll give you an example. I will say, if we use the word with a small h, we could use it in a variety of very, very serious incidents. Like, I'm trying to think. Yeah, you could say that was a Holocaust. Or if there was a terrible, terrible fire that killed many people, you could say many people died in that fiery Holocaust, okay? So it's something that's really bad that kills lots of people. But again, a Holocaust is like, it describes the whole incident, whereas a massacre is like it's like almost like you do something to somebody else. You kill them. I mean, of course, in the Jewish Holocaust, they were intentionally killed by the Germans. But yeah, anyhow, it's one single incident. It's one, whereas a Holocaust can be something much bigger or broader. Yeah. Anyhow, let's say that again. Massacre. I think I'm spelling that. H-O. Oh, sorry. I thought that looked strange. I don't know. Maybe. Yeah, it might be. Yeah, sorry. I spelled that wrong. So Holocaust. Why don't we say together? Holocaust. Holocaust. And again, if it's a capital H, it's referring specifically to the Jewish Holocaust of World War II. Okay. So massacre means killing, but mass killing, the killing of lots of people. There's many massacres in history by different groups. Okay, so in the aftermath of the Tiananmen Square massacre, in which the military used deadly force, of course, deadly force means you use force to kill people, to end demonstrations or Kangyi protests, led China Jiang Zemin led China towards its emergence. Now, emergence means to what? What would be another word here for instead of emergence? Appearance. Appearance would be closer in meaning, but it could be, I think a better word would be the rise, R-I-S-E, the rise, okay? But emergence means to come out. To emerge means to come out, right? If you emerge from the water, it means you come out of the water, right? But I think a better word that's very similar to this idea is to the rise of China as a global economic powerhouse, okay? Let's say that word, emergence. Emergence. Right. Okay. So let's read this. Jiang took power in the aftermath of the Tiananmen Square massacre. Massacre. In which the military used deadly force. To end demonstrations and led China toward its emergence as, let's say it again, emergence as a global economic powerhouse. Again, global economic powerhouse. Okay, that's a photo. Okay, the major bodies of the Chinese Communist Party announced his death through a letter that expressed profound grief. Jiang Zemin passed away due to leukemia and multiple organ failure in Shanghai at 12:15 p.m. on November 30, 2022, at the age of 96. It was announced on Wednesday, Xinhua News Agency said. Okay, so what does this mean? Profound, yeah, grief. Okay, grief means, what's another word for grief? Sadness, I think, is probably the better word. So you can say, I feel profound sadness at his passing, right? Or his departure. Profound means very deep. Now, profound can be used to describe grief or sadness, but you can simply say that something is very profound, right? Sometimes you read something in, I don't know, what's philosophy, what is that, 哲学, right? And you read it and you're like, wow, that's really deep, right? That really touches me. So you can say that is very profound. Or maybe your friend says something to you and you think, wow, that's really profound, right? That really moves me. That's very deep. That touches me. So we can say something is very profound or someone is very profound, but usually it's something that someone says or something that you read, okay? So it can be that as a 形容词, or it can describe something else like profound grief, profound sadness. I guess you could say profound happiness, but usually we say grief or sadness or profound, I don't know, there's other things. So why don't we say together profound? Profound grief. Okay, so, and then this is interesting. I didn't even know he had this, but what is leukemia? Yeah, I didn't know Jiang Zemin had leukemia. But anyhow, let's read that together. Leukemia. Leukemia. Yeah, so it's a very... Yeah, I mean, he could... I would say Jiang Zemin died of old age. That's what I would say. Because, you know, he was old. I mean, you probably saw videos of him, right, on TV. People had to help him walk and sit down, and yeah, he was pretty old. Multiple organ failure. Of course, this is, I think, pretty much like old age, right? Yeah. This is a very common term, right? When somebody dies, there, of course, yeah, your heart fails, your lungs fail, your everything fails. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Let's read this then. The major bodies of the Chinese Communist Party announced his death through a letter that expressed profound grief. Let's say it again, profound grief. Jiang Zemin passed away due to leukemia and multiple organ failure in Shanghai at 12:13 p.m. on November 30, 2022, at the age of 96. It was announced on Wednesday. Xinhua News Agency said, okay, let's go on. It says, his death came after all medical treatments had failed, it added, citing the letter. Comrade Jiang Zemin was an outstanding leader, a great Marxist, a great proletarian revolutionary, statesman, military strategist, and diplomat, a long-tested communist fighter, and an outstanding leader of the great cause of socialism with Chinese characteristics, it said. So there's a long list here, right? Okay, so, okay, first of all, he was outstanding. What does outstanding mean? Yeah, excellent, great, right? If you say, wow, this food is outstanding, right? It's an expression means just great, excellent, right? Your report is outstanding. Your homework is outstanding. Why don't we say together, outstanding? Outstanding. You know, you can think about when it's outstanding, it stands out, right? People notice it, right? Okay, he was a great Marxist. You know what Marxism is, right? Yeah, Marxist. So if someone follows that, we say they are a Marxist. Okay, let's say it together, Marxist. Marxist. Okay, now here we get revolution. We talk about this is a very, what is this? Do you know the word proletariat? Is there a Chinese word for this? The proletariat is like, I'm not a communist expert, but it's like the people, right? The people that we say the masses, right? What are they? Well, I don't know how you say it in Chinese. This is a word. Yeah, it's like everybody. Yeah. So this word gets used in communism, right? I never hear this word used anywhere else. So why don't we say together, proletarian? Proletarian. Now this is a 形容词, but if you want to make it into a 名词, it's proletariat with a T-E, I believe. T-E. Yeah, proletariat. Okay. Okay, statesman. What's a statesman? Yeah, it's like a politician. It means a political leader, you know, or basically a politician. Let's say together, statesman. Statesman. Yeah. It's funny. I've never heard the word stateswoman, but I guess you could say stateswoman. Yeah, statesman. There should be, or statesperson. I don't know. Yeah. So I guess we better to say a political leader or a politician or something like that. Military strategist. Of course, I didn't know Jiang Zemin was a military strategist, but yeah, that means he, was a military. He made strategy. He made plans. He was a good military planner and diplomat. I think you know diplomat. He was a long-tested communist fighter. Now, of course, long-tested means you've been through many tests, right? You've been through many trials. You've been through many difficulties. So long-tested communist fighter, okay, and an outstanding leader, okay, again, outstanding, here's another word, outstanding leader of the great cause of socialism, 社会主义, with Chinese characteristics. Now, this is an expression that the Gongchangdang likes to use a lot. They don't say socialism, they say socialism with Chinese characteristics. And what are characteristics? Features, right? It means it's a style of socialism. It's a Chinese style socialism. Okay, so instead of characteristics, like you said, we can simply say features. Okay. Yeah. So why don't we say this word, characteristics? Characteristics. Right. And so you could say, what are the characteristics of Taiwanese food? Okay. And some people say, well, that's hard to describe. There's many things, right? Or you could say, what are the or does Thai food have any special characteristics? You could say, well, it's usually very spicy, and it has lemongrass, and it's a little bit of suan la, and all that. So yeah, those are characteristics. Okay. So yeah. Yeah, her story. Yeah. History. Yeah, I get it. His story, her story. Yeah. Anyhow. Okay, let's read this together. Comrade. Oh, and sorry. What does comrade mean? 统治, right? This is a word that communists love to use, right? In China, in Russia, or Soviet Union, Sulian, they always use the word comrade. Why don't we say together, comrade? Comrade. Now, comrade can be used as a normal word, right? You can say, he's my comrade in this. We've been very close as comrades in the military, or, in our project. So let's read this together. Comrade Jiang Zemin was an outstanding leader, a great Marxist, a great proletarian revolutionary, statesman, military strategist, and diplomat, a long-tested communist fighter, and an outstanding leader of the great cause of socialism. With Chinese characteristics. It said. Okay. So it says here, Jiang's death comes amid a flare-up of protests against COVID-19 lockdowns that have morphed into calls for more political freedoms, the most widespread since the 1989 rallies. Okay, so I find this very ironic, right? Jiang Zemin was kind of he kind of helped crack down on the 1989 Tiananmen Square protests, and now as he dies, there's more protests. So what does a flare-up mean? What's the other word? We just talked about another word. It's very similar to this. Eruption, right? Outburst, an eruption. Yeah, outbreak. Yeah, I guess we could say. But flare means, it's the idea of like a fire, right? A flare-up. Okay. You know what a flare is? Well, Actually, it's a very specific name. They don't use them in Taiwan too much, but if you're in an emergency and you need to attract attention, you can pull this thing and it shoots fire into the sky. It's almost like a yanhuo, yeah, but it's for emergencies. Sometimes in America, they have a flare and you can actually put it on the road by your car. If your car breaks down on the highway and it actually creates a flame, like a fire, it's a stick, and you light it and you put it on the road and it creates a very bright fire for a short time, and they can see your car. Okay, so that's called a flare. So anyhow, why don't we say together, flare up. Flare up. Okay, a protest against COVID-19 lockdowns. Now, this is a very interesting word. It has morphed into calls for political freedoms. What is to morph? To change, yeah. It's the idea, yeah, it comes from the word metamorphosis, okay, which is kind of a scientific word, right? Now, metamorphosis is a very long word. I think I'm spelling this right. Metamorphosis. I think that's correct. I think it's an O. Metamorphosis. Yeah, I think that's correct. So yeah, like he said, a caterpillar, you know, like what is that, like a chong or something, it turns into a butterfly, you know, it metamorphosizes, or we could say it morphs into a butterfly. Okay, so in science, in nature, many things will morph or they'll change. I guess we could say transforms, you know, to transform into something else, to become something else. Okay, sorry, that's the M. So why don't we say this long word together, metamorphosis. Metamorphosis. Okay, now we could make this into a verb. We could say to metamorphosize into something, but it's easier to say morphed into something, okay? And then, of course, or to transform into something. Okay, so this protest against the lockdowns have now morphed. They've transformed into calls for more political freedom. You know, originally they were protesting the lockdown. Now they're protesting for more freedom. Okay, and this is the most widespread, the broadest protest, the biggest, broadest protest since the 1989 rally. Of course, a rally is a big gathering. Okay. Okay, so let's read this. Jiang's death comes amid a flare-up of protests against COVID-19 lockdowns that have morphed into calls for more political freedoms. The most widespread since the 1989 rallies. Okay, so 1989 rallies. Okay. Okay. Let's read a couple more and then we'll go into a last story I want to look at. It says, when Jiang replaced Deng Xiaoping in 1989, China was still in the early stages of economic modernization. By the time he retired as leader in 2003, China was a member of the WTO. Beijing had secured the 2008 Olympics, and the country was well on its way to superpower status. Okay, and you know what a superpower is, right? Like we say U.S. is a superpower. China is also, I guess, a superpower. So status means your position. Yeah, your position. Okay. So modernization, you know this word, right? Modernization is a means. It means to modernize, right? To become modern. Okay. What is it? 现代化 or something like that, right? Okay. So why don't we say together, modernization. Modernization. Okay. So let's read this. When Jiang replaced Deng Xiaoping in 1989, China was still in the early stages of economic modernization. Modernization. By the time he retired as leader in 2003, China was a member of the WTO. Beijing had secured the 2008 Olympics, and the country was well on its way to superpower status. Let's say it again, superpower status. Okay. Now, when we say well on your way, right, it means you're almost there, right? You're making good progress towards something. So you can say he is well on his way to becoming wealthy, right? Or to being successful. It means he's making good progress. He's on his way, well on its way. Or you say you're well on your way to doing something. Okay, let's read one more here. It says, analysts say Jiang and his Shanghai gang faction continued to exert influence over Chinese politics long after he left the top job, including the selection of Xi Jinping as president in 2012. Okay, so you know what a faction is, right? In Taiwan, we always hear about 党派, right? The faction of this party or that party, right? So why don't we say together, faction. Faction. And this faction for Jiang Zemin is called the Shanghai Gang. It's like the Shanghai group, Yeah, Shanghai Bang, right? Continued to exert influence over Chinese politics. Now, this is a good word, to exert influence, or we could say to exert power or something. What does to exert mean? It means to have power or to, but it's I guess you could say apply. It means to it's an active word, right? If you exert influence, it doesn't mean you just have it, but it means you apply it to something. You apply influence to something. It means you still have influence over something. But exert has a kind of a active word sense to it. It means you're actually doing it. You're pushing it, right? I think apply would be a good word, to apply power over something. Yeah. Yes, because exert means to expend energy, right? If let's say you see somebody and they're working very, very hard and they're sweating and they're very tired, and you say, please don't exert yourself too much. It means don't work too hard. Or you can say you need to exert yourself more. It means you need to work harder, right? So to exert means to put in effort, right? To make effort, yeah. To exert, okay. But here to exert what? Exert influence means to apply that power, to put in, to control, to. I hope you understand what I'm talking about. Yeah, it's hard to describe. Yeah, you could say that. I have no more energy to exert, to apply, to give. Okay, so why don't we say together, exert. It has a Z sound, exert. Okay, so even though after he left the top job, the top position, he still had influence over Chinese. I mean, that would be an easy way to have influence over Chinese politics, including the selection of Xi Jinping. I mean, he helped select Xi Jinping as president. Okay, so let's read this. Analysts say Jiang and his Shanghai gang faction continued to exert influence. Let's say it again. Exert influence over Chinese politics long after he left the top job, including in the selection of Xi Jinping as president in 2012. Right. Well, but I've read something that was kind of interesting. They said that Jiang Zemin approved of Xi Jinping, but they're from two opposing factions, right? They're kind of fighting against each other for power. So, I think it's very complicated inside the Gongchangdang. I think different factions take turns before with power. And so, one faction, they have their people, and next time they go back and forth. It's like a power sharing. So I think that's why Jiang Zemin kind of brought Xi Jinping in. But again, I'm not an expert. But I sense that recently there was a struggle between the Shanghai gang and Xi Jinping, his power group, so it's a little bit complicated. So just before we wrap up today, I thought we would look at least one World Cup story, because this is very important. I don't know, have any of you watched any World Cup games? Okay, it's been fun. I've been disappointed though that Taiwanese local TV, they're not showing too much World Cup. I watched, CTS, right? Is it, was it Zhongshi? CTS Channel 11. Is it Zhongshi? Huashi, sorry. And they're only showing like I think of the kind of the bad games, right? Like Qatar, they're like the most the baddest team. And they show all their games. So I don't know. I hope they show more games. So anyhow, it says U.S. beat Iran to reach Cup last 16. Okay, so this is, 加油美国, it's good for America. Okay, I was with my friends in a restaurant. We watched the game where Japan beat Germany. And that was a great game. It was a lot of fun. And all the Taiwanese were cheering for Japan, right? They were all, it was funny. So it says here, savoring the victory. England's Marcus Rashford scored twice in the 3-0 victory over Wales. Now, this is talking about England's game, which he said was what I play football for, the biggest moments. Now, what does to savor mean? Yeah, if you enjoy something for a long time, it means you savor it. So, if you like, let's say you like chocolate, right? And if you eat it, but you keep it in your mouth for a long time and you just enjoy that flavor, that's to savor it. Now, if you eat it real quickly and you don't enjoy it, that's not to savor. But to savor something means to, like you said, to enjoy it over a little bit longer. But it's not just taste. Taste just means you get the taste. But if you savor it, taste, yeah. But taste is more just to enjoy, to taste it, to get the kogan, But savor means to enjoy it. If you enjoy it, you like it, you love it. So here he's savoring not chocolate, he's savoring the victory, Okay, so why don't we say together, savor. Savor. And if you want to turn this word into a 形容词, we say savory. Savory. So I use that word to describe food that is delicious. We can say delicious, delicious, delicious over and over again. It gets a little bit 无聊. So I use the word savory instead of delicious. It means it has a lot of flavor, good flavor. Okay, so let's read a paragraph or two. It says, the U.S. on Tuesday beat Iran 1-0 in a battle of geopolitical foes to reach the knockout phase of the World Cup, while England eased through against Wales. Okay, so a battle, of course, the U.S. and Iran, they're enemies. They're kind of like enemies, right? So what does the word foe mean? Enemy, right? F-O-E is another word for enemy. So why don't we say together, foe? Foe. And geopolitical means, of course, it's like kind of international. I don't know how you say it in Chinese. Yeah, okay. Geopolitical, that's a word we use. So, of course, Iran and U.S. for a long time have been geopolitical enemies. Why don't we say that word together? Geopolitical. Geopolitical. Okay, so they beat Iran to reach the knockout phase of the World Cup. So, this big dabi side has different phases, different sections. The knockout phase is the second phase and the reason they call it knockout is because if you lose, you're out. There's no second chance. So in this first group phase, you play all the teams in your group, and you see which is the top 2 teams will go to the next phase. But in the next phase, the next section, if you lose, you're gone, you're done, you're finished, you go home. Okay, so we call that a knockout phase. So why don't we say together, knockout phase? Knockout phase. Now it says here, England eased through against Wales. Eased through means it was what? Easily win. Yeah, it was an easy victory. It wasn't difficult. So you ease through. Okay. So yeah. Let's read this then. The U.S. on Tuesday beat Iran 1-0 in a battle of geopolitical foes. Let's say it again. Geopolitical foes. To reach the knockout phase of the World Cup. While England eased through against Wales. Okay, you know where Wales is, right? I was sitting in my office a couple days ago, and I heard my staff outside, and they were arguing. They were like, "Where's Wales?" There, and then finally, someone said, "No, it's in the UK, right? It's in Great Britain. It's a place." Okay. Yeah, it's beautiful. I've seen pictures of it. Lots of mountains and hills. Yeah. I want to say something. This word here, we pronounce the S with a Z. So let's say it again, phase. Phase. Okay. We can say that he is in a certain phase of life, right? You can say, right now I'm in a phase of my life where I don't want to work too hard. I don't know, whatever it might be. I want to relax more, Yeah. Okay. So here it says the Americans earned a second round meeting with the Netherlands after Christian Pulisic bundled the ball into the net in the 38th minute of an absorbing contest in Doha. Only the third international meeting of the bitter ideological rivals had been marked by a bad-tempered buildup. Okay, so Americans earned a second round. Of course, this is a second round, or we could say a second phase, right? They're going to play in the second phase, or second round, they play the Netherlands, Holland, right? After Christian Pulisic, this is a very famous American player, bundled the ball into the net. Now, of course, you could say he kicked the ball into the net, but the idea of bundle, what does bundle mean? Yeah, if you tie two things together, or you package something, and so it's almost like the idea was he took the ball into the net. He I don't know. We it's just an expression, but often if you bundle something, it means you package it, you wrap it up. Okay, and they just use that word to say the idea that he put the ball into the net. He kicked or took the ball into the net. So why don't we say together, bundled? Bundled. Now, bundle can be a 名词. It's another word for package, right? You can say, she left a bundle at the office for me to take home. A bundle of clothing, a bundle of, I don't know, whatever. So bundle the ball into the net in the 38th minute of an absorbing contest. Now, what's this word? Normally when we think absorb, right, we can say the cloth absorbs the water. But if something is really absorbing, what does that mean? Riveting, but there's a word that comes into my mind, and that would be fascinating. It means you're really, it's really fun or interesting to watch. Someone said riveting. Okay, if you are riveted, it means it grabs your attention. It captures your attention. So you can say, I watched the riveting movie. The movie was riveting. It means I couldn't stop watching. It was very, it grabbed my attention. It was really fascinating. I really wanted to watch it. So when you say something was absorbing, it means, wow, I really want to watch it. It was really fascinating. It was really interesting. Okay? So why don't we say together, absorbing? Absorbing. Fascinating. Fascinating. Riveting. Riveting. So this was a very fascinating contest in Doha, the capital city of Qatar. Okay, it says, only the third international meeting, okay, of the bitter, this was the third time they played against each other, of the bitter ideological rivals. And of course, rival could be another word for foe or enemy. And ideological means they have, of course, their ideas, we could say China and the U.S. are ideological rivals, or Iran, of course, they have different ideas about things. So they're ideologically different. Their 主义 is different, okay? So why don't we say together, ideological. Ideological. Okay, had been marked by a bad-tempered buildup. Now, buildup is what happens before something, right? You can say the buildup to the game means the things that happen before something, like before the game. So bad-tempered buildup means they were I think they were using words against each other before the game. Not just talking to each other, but maybe in social media or on TV or in the media, they were saying things about the other side, each other. So we can say it was bad-tempered. It was angry. Okay, there was an angry or bad-tempered buildup. Why don't we say this together? Bad-tempered. Okay. Okay, so let's read this and then we're out of time. So, okay, the Americans earned a second round meeting with the Netherlands. Netherlands. After Christian Pulisic bundled the ball into the net in the 38th minute of an absorbing contest. One more time, absorbing contest in Doha. Only the third international meeting of the bitter ideological rivals. One more time, ideological rivals had been marked by a bad-tempered buildup. Okay, one more time, bad-tempered buildup. Right. Of course, if you have a bad temper, it means you get angry easily. So if something is described as bad-tempered, it means it's angry, it's nasty, it's not good. Okay. Okay, any final questions? Anything? Well, I hope America, 美国加油 again, we'll go, hopefully we can beat 荷兰. I think we can. I think we can beat them. So yeah, Well, I don't know how he scored. Maybe he kicked the ball, maybe he pushed the ball with his body, but he put the ball into the net. Yeah. So yeah. I unfortunately I didn't get to watch this game, so it was too late. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning or something. Yeah. So okay, good. Well, we'll see you next time then. Thank you.